Okay. Okay. So, hi, I'm George, and today I'm going to answer a question. Have you ever asked that question of has anyone ever survived the coronavirus or Black Death or anything like that or any virus? Well, yes. But why? Do you ever wonder why they have survived this long? Do you ever wonder? It's because their body is firmly immune against every possible disease in the universe. Like any possible disease, you're immune against it. But how and why? Well, the thing is, think of how much effort it takes to make a copy of yourself. Like, you have to, first you gotta find a girl, and then you have to date, and then your trillions of cells merge together gradually, and then you have a human baby. But this baby doesn't have a well-trained immune system. It's not fully like the immune system of a baby is not fully trained to handle viruses. That's one of the reasons why babies often get sick, like very commonly, because they don't have enough T cells and B cells yet. And there's also the memory cells and memory T cells and memory B cells, but more on these cells later. Just for now, know that your T cells and B cells are immune against every possible disease. Now I'm going to answer the question, why and how? Okay, here's the thing. Have you ever seen the collection of viruses and bacteria that want to infect you? Have you ever seen them? It's like a lot of them. Like a lot of them want to infect you. Like this one wants to infect you, this one wants to infect you, and everybody and they want to make you their home somehow. But your immune system is immune against them. Even though the immunity might be weak, it can still fight it off. So, but how can it do it? How and why? So, now I'm going to answer that question. So, this immune system, your immune system, there are two categories, the innate and the adaptive. The innate response of the immune system is mostly just macrophages and neutrophils and like dendritic cells, and monocytes and natural killer cells. So, yeah, that's the innate response, but the adaptive response. Have you ever wondered why it's got that name? It's because the adaptive response, it can adapt to the virus infecting you. It all begins with a dendritic cell. It all begins with a dendritic cell traveling to the lymph node and looking for a T cell. Fortunately, T cells are actually able to mutate and develop all sorts of defenses. So, again, why can they do that? It's because they can multiply these gene fragments together to make one powerful gene fragment. Like this. Like that. So they can mold gene fragments together to make one powerful gene fragment. Okay, let's go back a few steps and imagine the world's building block. Let's imagine that. It's called, you remember this substance, it's called protein, right? Protein is like the building block of us. Protein is like a puzzle piece, and your enemies can use billions of puzzle pieces to create themselves. And by some pure random chance, some enemies could even merge together, creating even more powerful enemies that can raid and infect you more than what you used to have to deal with. But luckily, the T cells can also multiply gene fragments to make just the same genes to fight off these strains of viruses or bacteria that could possibly infect you. Every single strain. Isn't that cool? Every single strain. Just imagine them as like cooks. You want to make 1 billion dishes for your 1 billion customers that are going to arrive soon. So there's about 100 cooks, and they have and they have 100 ingredients. So let's imagine this. Okay, so eggs, vegetable, and 2 loaves of bread for an egg and vegetable sandwich, and let me see, and some whipped cream and chocolate and cake for some dessert. And then there's some ice cream, and then there's some ice cream, cinnamon, and cherries to make some ice cream for dessert. And then there's billions of possible recipes just with 100 ingredients, and you can make billions of possible recipes. That is really cool. And that's kind of what your T cell does. Your T cells and B cells kind of multiply gene fragments and take 3 random gene fragments and multiply them together to make one giant gene fragment that's able to recognize every possible enemy in the universe. And they take 2 or 3, and then they merge them together, making one big gene that can recognize the enemies that are about to attack you. And that's kind of how your immune system is so immune to other viruses. But there's one disadvantage. Do you know what that is? No? It's that your immune system, yes, it's a very powerful weapon. I know that. Yes, you think that your immune system is very powerful, but is it careful of what it does, you wonder? Do you ever ask yourself about the immune system and its careful status? Well, some of the immune cells are kind of careful, like the T cells, the helper T cells and natural killer cells, and but some of them are not, because some of them are like neutrophils that explode themselves to create toxic nets. Remember? So they explode themselves to create toxic nets. We're gonna make that video in the future, but just for now, know that your immune system is not careful of what it does. Some of your immune cells are just not careful what they do, and they just do it. Yeah, and that's why you get allergies. But there's something in your throat. Your throat has a trick up its sleeve to prevent all of this from happening. You know what it is? Well, I'll tell you. It's called the thymus. Most people are unaware that they have this organ since it's pretty, ugly. It's just two tiny chicken breasts sewn together to make one big lump. But it's indispensable for your survival. Your survival depends on it, because it does 2 of the most important jobs. Number 1, the utmost important, is that it forms new connections and T cells. New T cells. And number 2, it prevents them from being autoreactive. But how does it do it? Well, the T cells that come here, this is like the murder university, because the T cells that come here, they just go and pass through a test. Okay, so the thymus cells, the teacher cells in the thymus are pretty brutal, and the first test is the easiest test of all. It's being able to communicate with other immune cells. So it's like the teacher cells are checking everybody's communication skill and their test. And if that's good, then good job so far, T cells. And then there's a little bit harder test called if the T cell can communicate again with other immune cells, and if it doesn't pass this test, then it won't get the job. It's a test to see if your T cells can communicate with your other cells and not get overreactive. But if it does, then in order to suicide or apoptosis, the programmed cell death by the teacher cells, and then it doesn't actually get killed. It actually gets devoured by a macrophage once it apoptosises, and then macrophages come to devour them. And then there's a test called recognition of self test. Can it do that? But if no, then yes, they can pass this university and move on to be the protectors of the body. If yes, then they can then they'll die. But there's one exception to some of the worst students that enter here. They can turn into a special auto cell called a regulatory T cell. Regulatory T cells are like cells that prevent your immune system from also being overreactive, or they're called autoreactive. But you might also be wondering, how are T cells so indispensable? Why? I mean, looking at a T cell, you wouldn't be very impressed because it's the size of an average cell and it doesn't seem special, but it's a very special cell because it can put macrophages and neutrophils back into killer mode. Remember when you get cuts or bruises from a sharp nail or something, and then some soil bacteria invade your tissues, your cells? But your T cells were the first line of your immune well, not the very first lines. Your macrophages and neutrophils are, but in a nutshell, your T cell is actually the adaptive, and it's one of the most important cells because it is in charge of two duties: activating your antibody factories, which is the B cell, and activating and stimulating macrophages that are too tired. This T cell guy says, "Hey, wake up!" with a cytokine whisper, and the macrophage feels stimulated again, and that's kind of what its name is this game. It kind of like stimulates macrophages to get back up again. And in a nutshell, it's the first line of your adaptive immune defense, and it can prevent the cells of your innate immune system from being overwhelmed. The T cell and B cell are like your adaptive defenses if the innate is in danger of being overwhelmed by a specific strain like this one, or even these two. I developed multi-strains, so your body is constantly being invaded by these multi-strains that can like merge together to create an even more powerful strain. Okay, so let's review. So these strains are like combination devices with each other, and they can merge to become even more powerful strains by some genetic fusion. And then there's some T cells that can recognize every possible antigen like hooks, and they merge genes together to create one large gene to memorize every single enemy. And now we're going to talk about the final concept that I want to talk about: memory cells. Memory cells are like cells that can remember your enemy that attack you. Let's imagine you get attacked by a virus, or like coronavirus or measles or mumps or rubella or any virus, and you manage to survive from it. You manage to survive the virus, and your immune system kind of produces memory cells to combat the virus, like long-lived plasma cells and just memory B cells and memory T cells. They are in your blood, circulating around you, so that the same bacteria can never set foot. So if it does, they awaken right away, the second time or third time it does do that, the bacteria steps foot on you again. If the specific bacteria, like this one, steps foot on you again, your T cells will just fight it off because they have that memory encoded in them. And you might wonder, what's the purpose of these memory cells anyway? The purpose of this memory cell is that it makes you immune to this specific virus that infected you. And making antibodies actually takes a lot of time. Your immune system has to take a lot of time to make antibodies. And that's why you evolved the memory cells, because these memory cells things actually help protect you. Like the memory B cells are the most important because and memory T cells, because they can stimulate the defenses. I told you that they can stimulate, right? And they can stimulate the defenses once the same bacteria or virus attacks again. And once it attacks again, they stimulate the defense systems and have the antibodies ready, and they can hack their heads off. Yeah, that is very cool. So let's review again. So your immune system can recognize every possible enemy because it can mix gene fragments together to create one big gene fragment. And then the T cell, and then there's the thymus that kills the T cells that did not pass its test. Then and the T cells are like cooks that cook recipes and stuff that can memorize every single enemy. And then there's the memory B cells and memory T cells that remember all the enemies and produce the antibodies to fight them off if they invade again. So yeah, so that's all I want to talk about for this video. We're gonna make a future video about what really happens when you get attacked. It's a future video, so it'll come not right away, but like soon. Okay, that's all I want to talk about for this video. Bye!